En estos últimos días, Elisabeth Ferrari ha estado con nosotros compartiendo todos sus conocimientos en el área de las organizaciones y del trabajo con constelaciones estructurales en los negocios, en las organizaciones, dentro del marco de la formación SySt Basic Training que Geiser está desarrollando en América Latina. Elisabeth Ferrari es una profunda conocedora de las organizaciones y también del trabajo que se hace en el Instituto SySt de Alemania. Y por eso, aprovechando esta ocasión, nos gustaría hacerle unas cuantas preguntas sobre el trabajo que realiza SySt y toda la novedad que aportan las constelaciones estructurales. Elisabeth, welcome.
Thank you.
Can you tell us briefly what's SySt and what's the work SySt is doing in Germany and all around the world?
Sure. The SySt Institute was founded by Insa Sparrer and Matthias Varga Von Kibed in 1994. And Matthias Varga Von Kibed is an associate professor at the University in Munich for logic and philosophy of science, and Insa Sparrer is a psychiatrist. Yeah? And they both are developing at this institute systemic thinking. Systemic thinking, for example, means to think more in relations, in contexts, and not in the absolute elements. Yeah? Everything in this world is connected, and therefore everything influences everything. Yeah? We don't know how, but somehow there is this influence.
Yeah.
Develop systemic thinking means, for example, in a business context, a manager could say to his employee, "You are curious. You are a curious member of my team," or "You are a lazy member of my team." Yeah? To say it this way is less systemic because it always depends on the context. Yeah? For example, nobody is always lazy. Nobody is always curious. Yeah? Starting from this, it's a task of the managers to create contexts in which the team members are able to develop their skills. And this is sort of systemic thinking. And in order to do so, they developed formats, which depict general patterns, yeah, in this world.
Mm-hmm. And now that you say that, one thing that usually people ask is, and now that you've spoken about context, is how come that this tool, this systemic tool that you are developing along with Insa and Matthias, can be used both for family contexts and also for organizational contexts. Sometimes there is a kind of confusion that it couldn't be used for both contexts.
This is due to the formats. For example, which often happens in families and in business, yeah, you have two positions which are opposite, which even might contradict each other. Yeah? Then you have the first position and the second position. Yeah? And often it's the question of, should I do this or should I do that? Yeah? A question of either or. Yeah? And then you might think you have to choose. You have to choose this or that. Yeah? And then sometimes you come into a dilemma. Yeah? And now the question is, isn't it possible to find a sort of both? Yeah? So to combine this, yeah, that you don't have to choose either this or that, so it's possible in some way to have both. Yeah?
So in that sense, this dilemma could apply for, should I take this product or should I take that other product? Or should I marry or not marry, for example?
Exactly. And this means the structure. The structure is you have two positions which oppose each other, yeah? And now how to find another way to connect these positions, and this means the both, yeah? And for that, Matthias Varga and Insa Sparrer, they developed subtypes for this both, yeah? And understand these subtypes helps you to create creativity, or to be very creative, finding solutions in a way of both. Yeah,
and I understand that finding both is very important in all the dimensions of life, because it's a way of finding connections where sometimes there were special separations.
And even in business, because often you organize the different business units and you want to have these contradictions, or you want to oppose one unit to another. You want them to discuss it, yeah? For example, to have the sales unit, yeah, and the unit who is producing, yeah, to oppose each other because they have different goals, yeah? And therefore it's usually you have these tensions and you have these opposite positions in the business, and it's especially important to find the both.
Yes.
And both is always connected with development. You can't find the both without having development. Mm-hmm.
So I understand that, for example, when a company is in a process of development, mm-hmm. finding different ways of doing this both can be interesting for them.
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very helpful. For example, some manager says we only have to care for the profit. Others says no, we also have to care for the people. Yeah? Then you have profit and you have people, and now you find a way of both. Yeah? Mm-hmm. For example, you can only gain something, you can only have the profit if you care for the people. Yeah? This is one sort of both, and how do you care for the people, in which way you do it, so to improve also the profit. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Or another way of both would be to think of products, yeah, you can sell which care for the customers especially. Then you care for the people, yeah, and at the same time you care for your profit. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, according to you, Elisabeth, what is the difference between structural constellations and the work you do with other system constellations? In the last years, the world of constellations has developed a lot, and sometimes I found out that there is some confusion about different ways, different approaches. What would you say is the specific point, the turning point of structural constellations?
There are different schools, and SySt is one school in this constellation world. And the specific approach SySt has is to, we can work with constellations in a covered way. And covered means we don't need to know the content. For example, if a manager comes and says, oh, I have some sort of opposite positions and I don't know which decision I should take. Yeah? Then it's not necessary that he tells me anything about the content. Yeah? It's only necessary that he knows what does position 1 mean, yeah? And he may call it A or B or X or whatever he wants to, yeah? And what does position 2 means. And we can work with this without knowing anything about it. And this is very helpful in the business context, because then he doesn't have to share his secrets or perhaps the content. It's not necessary. And this is the main difference.
And that's also and that also leaves the consultant in a position of being very neutral. I can understand.
Yeah.
And not being prejudiced in one
this is
dimension.
This is one advantage, and the second one is the client or the manager or the team, they know at the end of the work, they have found the solution, because I couldn't give them any advice. I don't know anything. Yeah. So therefore, they are very sure they found the solution, and that also helps training them.
You have been in contact with Matthias Varga and Insa Sparrer for a long time. What would you say, in your experience, that is the great novelty, the great what they are bringing to the world? What would you say is what they are? What's the new, the uniqueness of what they are bringing into the world?
Perhaps they discovered something in the world. They discovered the general patterns, yeah, which are relevant to understand this world better. And they described these patterns so that they are useful, or you can use them in very different content, with very different content, or very different situations. Yeah? And looking with these patterns at situations, yeah, it makes me easier to look at the people who are active or who are in the situations. I'm no longer so interested in the content. I'm more interested in the people, and to I have the impression I can be aware of them, just like something like this. And I think this pattern, yeah, to depict the logic of our world. Yeah.
Sometimes people think or believe that using this approach can be so detached, so logical that let's say where's the compassion there? Where are other emotional parts in this approach? Can you say something about that? Is the human heart left apart, to put it?
No, it's only left apart if I leave it apart. Yeah. Therefore, again, working with this situation, one and another, yeah, and I work with the manager, I can focus on him. Yeah, I can focus on him, and he is focusing on the one and the other. Yeah, and I can listen to him. I can listen to the resources and the ideas for solutions he is producing, and I don't need to focus on the content. Yeah, and I can focus on the person. Yeah, and this I find very helpful.
So it goes somehow a step beyond.
I would say so. This is my experience. Yeah. I can be more aware of the person as a whole, because I don't need to care so much about the content, because he knows the content. I don't need to know it. Yeah.
And to tell the truth, that has been my experience too. Okay, so Elisabeth, thank you very much for being with us and for sharing all this knowledge you have. And I hope that this has helped to show a little bit of what SySt is doing and what structural constellations are bringing along. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.